Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to episode 4 of the 12th season of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown. This is the weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. Before we take a look at social media this week, I just wanted to remind you to check out my appearance this past weekend on the Booked on Rock podcast, hosted by the fantastic Eric Senich. We spent a little less than 2 hours chatting and spent a good hour and a half discussing Mike Campbell's brilliant autobiography, Heartbreaker, which I hope you've all been enjoying. Eric is such a brilliant mind when it comes to rock music and has as broad and deep a knowledge of the form as anyone I've ever met. Also, just a word that this episode has been a little delayed by my time management this past week, because my time management has been dreadful. We just, do you ever have those weeks where you just cannot get your shit together and act like an adult human being? I spent most of the Easter weekend with time off. I had Friday and Monday off, and I spent most of it playing Ghost Recon Wildlands, which is a fantastic video game. But by the time Tuesday rolled around, I had a whole pile of work stuff mounted up that outrageously got in the way of my podcasting. Anyway, apologies for that, and normal service will most definitely be resumed next week. Things were pretty quiet over on socials this past week, and as I went back to check, I realised that I didn't post the poll for Free Girl Now, which I've now remedied. Anyway, on Facebook, Paul Roberts posted, great pod, Kevin. No disagreement this week. It's a cast iron 10 from me. And of course, Paul is my executive producer, and thanks as always, Paul. And I think on some days I could definitely call it a 10 out of 10, despite me giving it a 9. And if I were pushed to defend that rating, I'd say that there are, songs other than Free Girl Now that are equally as good or better, but also slightly more happening in them musically, say. So I'll go with that. Over on Instagram, the titanically talented Megan Volpert commented, "This is one of my absolute favourites for so many reasons. Thanks for doing it justice." Well, thanks for checking that out, Megan. I really appreciate that. And I posted a few weeks back about having read Megan's new book, Why Alanis Morissette Matters, which I'd encourage everyone to buy and read. And I think it was this last week that I logged onto a Q&A session that Megan had online. She was supposed to go to Chicago, but she got sick and couldn't travel, so they ended up doing it online, which was good for me because I ended up being able to zoom in. She had a QA session, which I thoroughly enjoyed listening to because she expounded on the themes she explores in the book, through Alanis' work and how they always come back to being so heavily informed by her own experiences, especially as a queer person. So yeah, go check it out. Why Alanis Morissette Matters by Megan Volpert. Fantastic read. Finishing up over on Blue Sky, the wonderful Steve Ursel commented, "I like it, but I have to say that the line, 'I remember him touching your butt,' jars for me. It's way too clunky, which is unlike Tom. The admirable sentiment and genuine feeling behind the song could have been better served by something less on the nose. Outside of that, I think it's great." And you know what, Steve, that's fair. I get the sense that this was a mainly ad-libbed lyric, especially in the verses. Or maybe ad-libbed and then, a few changes here and there, but it definitely has that feel of one of Tom's stream of consciousness type lyrics, like another song we're going to be talking about on the show this season. As a last note, I just wanted to send some love Tommy Edwin's way. Tommy had a massive pulmonary embolism a couple of weeks ago, and I'm really glad to hear that he's working his way back to being healthy. The operation was a success. Tommy's he's playing again already a little bit. He's not out performing yet, but finger touch wood, that'll be sooner rather than later. Tommy's been on the show a couple of times now, and I'm really looking forward to chatting to him again at some point, as well as hearing what new music he's cooking up in that fabulous musical brain of his. Okay, well, that's all the social media and announcements and all those types of things we do at the top, all wrapped up for this week. Let's jump into the song, Lonesome Sundown. Okay, well, let's get into the song. Lonesome Sundown opens with a beautiful piano part from Benmont Tench that's shortly joined by a slide guitar part, almost certainly from Mike Campbell. I love how that piano is recorded with lots of reverb, but also a very slight, I'm going to use the word muffled. It's not muffled, isn't exactly the right word, but I can't find a better word as I'm writing this to describe what I'm saying. It's got that quality that makes me think it's an upright piano and not a grand piano that Benmont is playing. And maybe not muffled is the right, but maybe it's that kind of brightness to it. The opposite of muffled, in fact. So that tinkly tone, you don't really tend to hear that from a full-size grand. So I'd love to get behind the scenes with Benmont or anybody who's involved in the production to find out some of these little details that I'm always interested in. And where last week's song was incredibly simple in terms of its chord progression, this one has a beautifully fluid descending 9-chord pattern, which moves across both minor third and minor sixth, as well as the major fourth and fifth, and the roots, obviously. It's a really satisfying progression, and with the piano leading it, it sort of reminds me a little bit of Strangers by the Kinks. It's got a very similar tempo too, and the Kinks are another band I'm a massive fan of, and actually another band that I'd once considered doing a deep dive podcast about before I started the Queen podcast. That was another band that I was thinking, you know what? I could do a Kinks podcast. That'd be kind of cool. So after that 9-bar intro, because we have a hang of an extra bar on that final chord, making it 9 instead of 8, the drums and the bass come in, and it's that beautifully sparse mix that lets the rhythm section really shine. Steve Ferrone's snare has a fantastic whip crack to it that isn't muddied or held back by too much reverb, and it all sounds like a band playing in a room. That's almost always my favourite sound from the Heartbreakers. During the Counting on You episode, I'd mentioned that I thought that song had a slight ring of Wildflowers to it, but that it would have been right at home on Mojo. Well, I think that this track most definitely has a heavy ring of Wildflowers about it. And I think maybe it is the piano leads and those drums and bass guitar are mixed nice and full, so you get this really dry, forceful drive to the song that puts me in mind of some of the stuff on Wildflowers. And once the verse starts, an acoustic guitar part comes in on the left channel, leaving the right channel open for Mike's very gentle, heavily reverb-laden slide guitar lead. This leaves that central channel open for the piano and vocal, which is a nice little touch because it makes that connection between the voice and the instrument, and you can almost see and hear a pianist in a rundown little bar someplace off the Las Vegas Strip bemoaning his luck. I also love the line, "She's a sweet young thing, brings me dreams in a box she made for me." It's a very Petty-esque little piece of imagery that he throws in early to add to the very dreamy quality of the piece. In conversations with Tom Petty, Tom tells author Paul Zollo that the words changed several times in that song, but I finally got it to where I liked it. I think I worked on that one a lot more than any of the others. And when we were talking about Free Girl Now sounding much more spontaneous lyrically, this one does have that quality of being more, let's say, considered or deliberate or deliberated. I don't think many people would come up with "brings me dreams in a box you made for me" off the cuff, to be honest with you. Anyway, after that line, we get that extra bar hang again, and Mike adds in a little lick that really harkens back to early Eagles or music in that vein. It is that low-slung country blues rock slouch to it. From here, we move into the chorus, and we have a wonderfully captured 2-part backing harmony vocal. My guess here is that that's both Howie Epstein and Scott Thurston adding those parts, and I'd love to know if they actually recorded them together. There's a closeness to the way they sound that suggests that they may have been recorded in the room together rather than in separate takes in the vocal booth. We also get a big key change to E minor on the first chord of the chorus, and Paul Zollo mentions to Tom that the song is interesting musically in that it's got a shifting tonal center, so it's not clear even what key it's in. And this is what he means by a shifting tonal center. That move to E minor in the chorus, even though we do come back to A, means that the A in the chorus is now not the root. So while A is the root in the verses, it becomes the major fourth in the choruses. It's a great little trick, and Tom tells Paul Zollo, "I love to do that, if I can bust into another key from one and then somehow get back." It's not easy to do. The turnaround from the chorus back to the verse is a winding 9-bar journey that finds its way back from that E minor root to the original A, but in a very satisfying way. This is one of those progressions that, as Tom says, it isn't easy, but it's really cool, and as a musician, it's like super gratifying and really satisfying when you pull it off well, which obviously Tom does here. Through the second verse, Ben Montench adds a little more into the piano part, colouring in some of the spaces between the vocals with complementary licks to play off what Mike is doing on that slide guitar. Tom also changes the rhyme structure of this verse, and I stand accused outside the law, but you are all I need. Those 3 lines, obviously, that's the second half of the verse, and they don't rhyme at all, and they only resolve to a rhyme on that last line, where all I need rhymes with the last line of the first half of the verse. There's some more filling in from Mike in the transition out of this chorus again, but this time we head into the solo rather than another verse. The solo is, as you would expect from Mike Campbell, a beautifully relaxed, flowing groove where he bends and slides in equal measure and uses a lovely bright tone that I bet anything is played on either his broadcaster or, more likely, my guess would be a Telecaster, Fender Telecaster. There's something about the way a Fender sounds when it's put to country usage that I don't know if you can really replicate. Of course, you know what? I could be completely off on this. This could be anything. It could be a Gibson. It could be a Rickenbacker. It could be anything, because obviously Mike Campbell can get pretty much any sound out of any guitar. But you know what? That's what my ear tells me. I think it's a Fender. right, folks, it's time for some petty trivia. Your question from last week was this. Disenchanted with Tom's less intense focus on the album, Rick Rubin left before the record was mixed to work with which California band? Was it A, Slayer, B, System of a Down, C, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, or D, Rage Against the Machine? Well, Rick famously worked with Slayer on 1986's Rain in Blood, a far cry from the tenderness and vulnerability, as well as the compositional style of a more traditional rock and roll band. I have to tell you, though, there are plenty of heavy bands that I do enjoy. I'm a huge fan of Iron Maiden and Black Sabbath, for example, but I've simply never found a route into Slayer or Pantera, those types of bands. It's all a bit more angry and shouty than I find I can tolerate. Rubin also produced another very heavy band in System of a Down, working on their self-titled debut in 1998, the year before Echo was released. The year after Echo was released, Rubin also worked on Rage Against the Machine's final album, Renegades, but before that, the answer is the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Rubin really irritated Tom by leaving Echo to work with the band on their hit Californication. So much so that he only gave them, I think it was an assistant producer or something, credit in the album notes. Okay, your question for this week is this. Which song by the Red Hot Chili Peppers was alleged to have ripped off the chord progression and rhythmic approach from Mary Jane's Last Dance? Is it A, Californication, B, Danny California, C, Scar Tissue, or D, the Zephyr song? Okay, back to the song. In the last verse, there's the unexpected and wonderfully effective addition of a light organ part. Probably just playing open fifths and slightly above the middle of the keyboard. It adds a different element to the arrangement as the piano drops out of the first 8 measures before sneaking back into the room for the rest of the song. And we talked lots about how the Heartbreakers build songs up very carefully, so there's always some way that the song is developing and something interesting to listen to. And this one is a very patient, unobtrusive example of that. As the song moves into its outro section, Mike adds a tremolo effect to his lead guitar part to finish the song off in a bright, somewhat slightly quirky way. It almost feels like a slight homage to Something by George Harrison in the way that he bends those final notes into that last chord, which again lands on that root A chord, which never sounds at the end like a root because of the progression that precedes it, and we talked about that. Marvelous, subtle stuff. It's a shame this one was never pulled out live, and I think that had the Heartbreakers ever done an MTV Unplugged style performance, maybe around the Mojo era, this would have been a perfect one to pull out. You could have had Mike playing the dobro rather than that electric slide, and maybe Scott Thurston adding in some harmonica, along with Steve playing with brushes rather than his sticks, and it would have been fantastic. So if there's anyone out there who's ever done a little bit more of an acoustic arrangement of this one, let me know. The lyrics in this song are most definitely rooted in Tom's fragile personal state of mind during this time of his life. He tells Paul Zollo, "I think I was thinking kind of deep there. I'd gotten in that zone and it all just started coming. I was going through a lot in my life when I wrote that. I went through a divorce the year before and I was trying to get just settled into a new life. And some of that is reflected in the songs, I think, and my relationship with my children. But I didn't want to write one of those I just got divorced albums. So I consciously tried to stay away from it. But some of it creeps in." Well, I would say that the first time I listened to Echo as a whole, I had no idea about any of Tom's personal circumstances, but I could feel, obviously, that he was writing about a character that was having a really, really tough time of it. The line, "this is going to be hard," is really quite unambiguous. But now that I know the story well, and especially with Tom's comments to Paul Zollo, for me, this is undoubtedly written by a father for his daughters. "I'll never let you down. This love I've found, it means too much to me. I stand accused outside the law, but you are all I need." So most people who've been through a breakup, either, breaking up with someone themselves or being a child when their parents break up, or you've had friends who have separated, quite often you'll see parents struggle to maintain a respectful attitude toward the person they've left, especially in front of the kids. So that line, "I stand accused," to me is Tom telling the girls that no matter what you hear about me, know that I love you and that you will always come first. It's a beautiful sentiment. Okay, Pettyheads, that's it for this week. A slightly shorter episode. Lonesome Sundown is one of those tracks that I've always really liked. It has its own specific feel, which I think is in large part due to that unusual key change and the sort of convoluted return to the root, but also in the haunting lyric. Now, if I was grading this in the style that we use over on the Ultimate Catalog Clash, one of my other podcasts that you should definitely check out, I'd give it a 7.5 out of 10 for music, a 9 out of 10 for lyrics, and a 5 out of 5 for production, which would land me somewhere around an 8 out of 10 overall, which is what I'm going to go with for Lonesome Sundown. 8 out of 10. The Tom Petty Project is a proud member of the Deep Dive Podcast Network. Go check us out at deepdivepodcastnetwork.com. You should also check out my other podcast, Seaside Pod Review, a Queen podcast that I do with my best friend and musical mentor, Randy Woods, who performs all the music you hear in this podcast, as well as the Ultimate Catalog Clash that I co-host with my great pal, Corey Morissette. We are almost at the end of Season 5. We just have Side A and Side B of The Amazing Kamikaze Syndrome by Slade to review, and then we'll be done another season, and we'll find out who we'll be covering in Season 6. I know that one of my listeners, Bob Reedy, is really anxious for me to get into Bruce Springsteen, so you know what, Bob? Maybe he'll be on the list. You never know. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at The Tom Petty Project, and on Blue Sky at Tom Petty Project. Go like, follow, subscribe, do all those things, and do please leave a rating. Keep talking to me on social media. Been very quiet lately. Let's get some more chatter going. And I'll keep reading out your comments on the show. And as a weekly reminder, the Tom Petty Project is not affiliated with the Tom Petty Estate in any way. So if you're looking for Tom's music, please visit official streaming platforms, or better yet, go to your local independent record seller to grab some actual physical media. If you're looking for official merchandise, go to store.tompetty.com. And if you're looking for merchandise for this show, please go to store.tompettyproject.com. Don't forget to check out the Tom Petty Nation and Tom Petty Fans Forever groups on Facebook. And make sure you check out Tom Petty Radio on Channel 31 on Sirius XM. Until we meet again next week, keep listening to and sharing Tom's music. Try to be kind. Try to say I love you to someone at least once a day. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll be back with you next week to talk about the iconic fifth track from Echo, Swingin'. Bye-bye.